Hello, and welcome to Raising the Bar with the MBBA. I'm your co-host, Adeola Adejobi.
And I'm Jason Clark, president of the Metropolitan Black Bar Association. Those of you who have been with us for a while probably know a little bit about the MBBA, but for those of you who don't, we are the largest association of predominantly African-American attorneys in New York. Our goal is advancing equality in the pursuit of justice, assisting in the professional development of our members, and addressing legal issues affecting New Yorkers.
The goal of Raising the Bar with the MBBA is to foster a substantive conversation about justice issues in our community and to identify a couple of solutions in the process. Today, we are going to talk about revitalizing our economy post-COVID-19.
Thank you. And joining us now, we have Mondaire Jones, a former assistant county attorney at the Westchester County Law Department, also Democratic congressional candidate for New York's District 17. As well as Jamaal Bowman, a 20-year public school educator and founding middle school principal in the Northeast Bronx, and also a Democratic congressional candidate for New York's District 16. Great. Welcome both of you, Mondaire, as well as Jamaal, to Raising the Bar at the MBBA.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Great. So as Adeola mentioned, today we're going to be talking about what we can do to revitalize our economy. Before we start that discussion, can you talk a little bit about what the economy looked like pre-COVID-19 and what it looks like now during COVID-19?
First of all, thank you for having us here. You know, what I have been reminding people of is the fact that even before COVID, we lived in a country where for so many people, tens of millions of people, their health insurance was tied to their employment. And we have seen now that since the month of March, over 30 million people have been added to the unemployment rolls. And I think people who previously didn't quite realize how it impacted them when other people didn't have health insurance when they did themselves are now taking another look at that reality and seeing that we need something better than what we have. And for me, that looks like Medicare for all. We also lived in a situation where people, so many folks, were not guaranteed paid sick leave. That is not a requirement in the Family and Medical Leave Act, also known as the FMLA. And so now we're seeing that people who are symptomatic or may think that they have COVID having now to go into work because they can't afford to stay home without income or some kind of cash assistance are really exacerbating a public health crisis because of the failure of government to provide for that.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, we were existing within a system of economic inequality, and that economic inequality always falls along racial lines. And when you look at the inequality in this country, you know, the top 3 earning Americans in our country earn more wealth and hold more wealth than the bottom 50% of the nation. The top 0.1% owns more wealth than the bottom 90% of the nation. It was a system that rewards Wall Street, not Main Street. It's a system designed to keep wealth concentrating in the hands of a few while the many continue to struggle. A system that allowed large corporations like Amazon to not pay any federal taxes and many others. And a system that doesn't require or demand that the wealthy pay their fair share into a system. If we had a system like that, we would see more equity across the board, and we would be able to invest in healthcare through Medicare for all, which Mondaire pointed out, which I support as well. We would be able to invest in the Green New Deal and provide a federal jobs guarantee and deal with our environmental crisis that's happening across this country. So it was a system of economic inequality, and hopefully, unfortunately, you know, we have COVID, which is shining a light on the economic inequality and the equality that existed in all of our institutions. And now, hopefully, if Mondaire and I are fortunate enough to get into Congress, we can able to build and put together an infrastructure that closes the gap in terms of inequality, both racially and economically.
Yeah, and that was definitely an excellent background that both of you provided to us. So, you know, let's get to it. Can you talk about your perspective and your ideas around how the economy can be revitalized after COVID-19?
You know, this is a real opportunity for people who have been pushing the kinds of big, bold structural changes to our economy that, frankly, we needed so desperately even before the COVID pandemic. And so I am someone who always is optimistic about any number of scenarios. And as I look to the silver linings, I think to myself, we now live in a world where 90% of Democrats, it was reported just a few days ago, support Medicare for all. We live in a world where Donald Trump, a Republican president who was no friend of working people, has waived for a 6-month period of time interest on federally guaranteed student loans. And so, of course, that doesn't go nearly as far as I would go. I think that we need to eliminate college debt in this country. And I've been talking about that well before COVID happened. You know, we've got $1.7 trillion in student debt nationally in this country. And for thousands of people in my district, and I suspect in Jamaal's district, folks are having to live at home despite having college degrees with their parents and their grandparents because they can't afford to be out on their own paying rent or owning a home, due in large part not just to stagnant wages that have been like that for decades, even as the cost of living has increased, but also because of a student debt crisis that keeps them locked at home and unable to meaningfully participate in this economy. So for me, it's looking at making sure, because after COVID is over, we are going to be devastated as an economy, that we provide the kinds of immediate relief to working people that are going to help them survive and get out and really pull themselves up, right? So that means healthcare literally guaranteed to everybody. It means making sure that we, as I mentioned earlier, have forgiven student debt, but also it means looking at a homes guarantee. I support housing for everyone, right? One of the reasons why there was a delay in closing down New York City schools was because 114,000 public school students were homeless. And so, you know, as we look to how we can avoid a situation like this in the future from being nearly as terrible as it currently is right now, we have to look at strengthening the safety net, making sure that folks who will be unable to go back to the jobs that they previously had also have good jobs and have better paying jobs. It's why I support a Green New Deal, where we could do things like build transportation infrastructure in my district. And these are going to be good paying jobs that provide a bunch of benefits. And so it's a real opportunity to invest in green technology and green jobs. And that's something that, frankly, there wasn't enough political will for before COVID happened.
Absolutely agree with every point Mondaire just made. In addition to that, we need a federal minimum wage of $15 an hour at least. There are many parts of this country where people are earning $8 an hour, $12 an hour, and obviously wherever you are in this country, you're not able to pay your bills, your rent, your utilities, buy food, and have discretionary income that you could use to have social opportunities with your children and with your families. So a federal minimum wage of $15 an hour will lift millions out of poverty right away. Mondaire mentioned canceling student debt, which I agree with 100%. That should be done. We need to also cancel the medical debt in this country. So many people are drowning under medical debt. And if that were to be canceled, we would lift millions more out of poverty. You know, we have to understand that, you know, real wages have been stagnant over the last 50 years, while childcare costs have gone up, education costs have gone up, housing costs have gone up. And I'm happy Mondaire mentioned a homes guarantee, which we both signed on to, which we both support. Ilhan Omar has a bill where she's looking to invest $1 trillion over the next 10 years to build 12 million new social homes where people will have part ownership of their homes and their land and a commercial real estate attached to that. I also support universal child care. I mean, people are paying child care. Child care is like another bill. It's like a utility. It's like a rent payment every month, and people simply can't afford it. They're drowning in child care debt. They're drowning in medical debt, drowning in education debt, and universal child care will provide additional resources, discretionary resources for family to use in whichever way they see fit. Another thing I wanted to mention, I think we're going to go into education soon, but one thing I want to mention is school curriculum can be aligned to high priority sector jobs that currently exist and that are going to exist, like within the green economy, as Mondaire mentioned. So we need to align our school curriculum to the needs of the economy and the new economy that we're developing, so that when kids come out of high school, they're ready to pursue employment. So those are a few proposals I support.
Yeah, no, and actually that's a great segue, because, you know, sometimes we don't realize the role that, you know, the government plays in our economy, and especially times like this when we think about the role the economy played with the Great Depression, or the recession right after 9/11, or Superstorm Sandy. You know, trying to figure out what this next steps are and how the government can play a role in, you know, and, bouncing back. So with that being said, based on where Jamaal was just going, for either one of you, what are certain things within the government that people should expect to be done to help, with improving our economy?
One of the things that I've been writing about recently, I just published something in Crooked Media, is we need to look at the federal poverty line. There are going to be a lot of folks after COVID is over, and we're trying to emerge from this pandemic, who are going to need government services in a way that they never previously needed it. But even before COVID, it was the case that we were relying on a definition of poverty at the federal level that had been defined pretty arbitrarily in 1963. Do you know that for an individual, the federal government defines poverty as being below $12,700? And meanwhile, we know that, to Jamaal's point earlier, the cost of childcare alone for a family of four is over $2,000 on a monthly basis. To say nothing of the cost of healthcare, which is more like $500 something a month, housing, which can run you, between $1,500 and $2,000 on average in my district in Westchester and in Rockland counties. And these were expenses that not just were not nearly as high back in 1963 as they are today, but they just weren't even a factor. Folks have, talk about utilities. A cell phone bill is a utility at this point, because how do you communicate with the world? How do you do anything without a cell phone in your life? And so I support raising the poverty line. There's a legislation that has been proposed by AOC in Congress that would do precisely that. It would make it more realistic. And of course, the federal poverty line doesn't even differentiate by regional cost of living. So we have a single standard across the United States of America. So folks in Mississippi are being defined at a level of poverty at the same rate as folks in my district, which is an affluent district and extremely expensive place to live. So I think there's an opportunity to do something with that. I think as we look to the federal government, we have to provide rental assistance for people who have been out of work for so long. We know that even before COVID, the average person only had savings in the amount of $400, I believe it is. And so we really have to inject liquidity into this market by giving money directly to working families, and not just bailing out corporations with limited oversight. And without any sort of requirement that they continue to put people on their payrolls. We've got to make sure that the federal government is really exerting itself in a way that it hasn't been before. And as we shape legislation, here's an opportunity to make our policies reflective of the lived experiences of people in this country.
Yeah, and there actually is historical context here. I mean, if we look at what FDR did with the New Deal, he literally invested in our people, invested in our country, and he built the middle class. The problem is Black people weren't allowed to participate in the New Deal during that time. And as a result, we were forced into concentrated poverty through redlining. So, Mondaire mentioned it before, a Green New Deal provides a federal jobs guarantee for anyone who is willing to work. A Green New Deal provides a family sustaining wage. It targets communities that have been historically oppressed. It aligns with social housing in focusing on the Green New Deal for public housing and make sure everyone has health care. And listen, if you work 40 hours a week, you should have exemplary health care, and you should be able to earn paid vacation leave. And that's currently not happening for millions of people. In addition, the federal government can pass laws, pass policy where the wealthy are paying their fair share into the system. A 2% capital gains tax where we're taxing Wall Street transactions. It will not hurt the pockets of the billionaires who are worrying about it. They should be able to afford it, and it will provide the revenue that government can use to create jobs, but then also invest in minority and women-owned businesses, because there are many entrepreneurs in our communities, particularly Black and Brown communities, that don't have the capital because they don't have the wealth to invest in themselves and invest in their ideas through entrepreneurship. When you look at technologies like Apple and Facebook and Microsoft and Twitter, Our kids have that same brilliance and the same ideas and the same creativity to create something that could generate billions and trillions and create thousands of jobs across the country. So government needs to begin to invest in people first and foremost, needs to invest in small businesses, community businesses first and foremost. With the recent bailouts, 4 bailouts, they continue to bail out large corporations that benefit the wealthy, and the working class and the poor are still struggling. So it's a paradigm shift where we're focused on people and building our economy from the bottom up.
Yeah, and if I could interject for a quick second, if there is one silver lining, it does seem that people are finally starting to appreciate the value of essential workers, right? A lot of folks who we've been looking at, a lot of folks that people will say, why should we be making sure that they have a minimum wage, where we should even be talking about a living wage as opposed to just a minimum wage. And on top of that, maybe people are starting to appreciate why their services are so important, not just for the economy, but also really for their self-interest, so that they can be able to have some of those services and appreciate what they do for folks.
Yeah, I mean, and totally, to add to that, I mean, I think one thing that people are starting to realize too is you need people for an economy, right? It's in everyone's best interest for people to be healthy, for people to be able to have their kids in have childcare and have a quality education. So when they're at work, they can focus at work and produce the best work product, but then also providing opportunities for the next generation of who's going to be in this country, running this country as well. And so with that being said, Jamaal, I would love to, hear from you with your, depth of experience in the educational sector. Can you talk more about how an investment in education can help revitalize our economy?
Yeah, it's 2 things. It's investment and it's philosophy. Right now, our philosophy of education is rooted in a myopic view of what intelligence looks like. We have annual standardized tests in grades 3 through 8. We're focused on ELA and math, and that one single test is a judgment for how well schools are doing, teachers are doing, and how well students are doing. Obviously, there is a place for standardized tests. It doesn't have to happen annually, and if we're going to do them, we have to include science, we have to include the arts, we have to include social studies as well. So in our school, one of the things we did, we were a small middle school, grades 6 through 8, about 260 kids. Our kids beginning in 6th grade were learning computer science. Because coding is the new foreign language of the 21st century. So it's about the curriculum you implement. They learn computer science beginning in 6th grade through 12th grade. Now they could become the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Steve Jobs and the Bill Gates of the world, right? So again, not just the traditional approach to education, but an approach that taps in to not just student civics understanding, but their vocational understanding 2.0. So we always have vocational schools back in the days. Like my mom had vocational school. She had typing, she had knitting, she had a bunch of courses in alignment with that. But in our schools, if we implement a curriculum connected to the needs of an economy, kids are coming out ready to learn and work within that economy. Last thing I would say is this. Our learning environment needs to be more collaborative, needs to be more project-based. Kids need to have the opportunity to work in diverse groups on projects and have opportunities for self-directed learning so that they can find their passions and their skills and their purpose. Right now, schools are not designed that way. It's pretty much top-down, teacher-directed. Teacher gives information, students give it back, and that's enough. And if you give back the right information, you pass the class. But what we're talking about is learning 2.0 in a 21st century economy where kids are self-directed as well as working collaboratively. Because as we all know, as adults, those are the skills you need in a project-based setting to really thrive in our economy.
And one of the things we'll also probably have to think about is, you hear about how there are certain folks who just don't have access to, to broadband or an ability to be able to have their classes online because they don't have the resources. And, trying to figure out what role the government plays with that, or the thought that I think when folks are talking about, being able to have access to the internet as not just as a privilege, but really as a right, so that people can be able to keep up with their classes. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Exactly.
want to say one thing about that. So our new deal for education calls for the quadrupling of federal funding in Title I schools, which will help bridge that gap, right? Bridge the resource gap in terms of, why some schools don't have the resources they need while other schools do. So we call for a quadrupling of Title I funding, fully funding the IDEA law, which is the law that supports our students with special needs, and then funding schools based on need, not based on geography. Because of redlining, which is a racist policy, in Scarsdale within our district, because of property taxes, those schools receive more resources than schools in Mount Vernon, Yonkers, and the Bronx. And that's just unacceptable. It's a racist policy starting back with the New Deal, FDR's New Deal. And what we need to fund schools based on is economic need as well as social and emotional need as well.
And then Mondaire, based on your experience over with the Westchester County Law Department, what are some of the things that you've seen from, your years with the law department and your experiences as to how the government can play a role in, revitalizing or, getting our economy back to where it needs to be?
As an assistant county attorney in the Westchester County Law Department, I was an attorney on behalf of Westchester County, which has a ton of agencies that when they are working well, help to basically facilitate our social interactions, our economy in Westchester and elsewhere in the region, to make sure that we have roads that are paved, to make sure that we have enough money to pay all of our employees. And we know that government employs a lot of people in our society, and that's certainly Westchester County is certainly no exception. Those jobs tend to be good paying jobs and have benefits, and that's why they're so attractive to people. I think of the fact that this recent legislation that passed out of Congress, unfortunately, did not contain any aid for states and local municipalities. It is horrific what has been coming out of Washington and what has not come out of Washington, despite the fact, frankly, that we have a Democratic majority in the House of Representatives that you would think if it flexed that majority more vigorously would be able to get more concessions from this president. So for me, I plan on, and I hope I'm able to do this as a member of Congress, to fight for more aid for our states and local governments. Certainly New York statewide, we are facing what Governor Cuomo has predicted to be a $10 billion shortfall. And then of course we need to tax the super rich, and which is something, including billionaires, which is something he's as yet been unwilling to do. But in Westchester County and in Rockland County, we need to make sure that we get money for infrastructure. It's why one feature of a Green New Deal in my district would include something like a high-speed rail in Rockland County into New York City and to Westchester County. In most parts of Rockland, we don't even have train access, unlike in Westchester County, which at least has the Metro North. In Westchester County, we used to have light rail in Ossining and in Peekskill, and transportation is important. Why am I talking about transportation? Transportation is important because it is so essential for folks participating in this economy, getting to work and getting elsewhere, but also because the transportation sector is the single biggest contributor to carbon emissions globally. And so if we can help in the process of creating jobs and facilitating people's participation in the economy, wean people off of their reliance on automobiles and buses in the way that people have to do in Rockland County, for example, it's a win-win. And the same is true for the roads that will need to be paved. Teachers, we'll talk about education, local school districts have negotiated annual salary increases with the unions. How are those teachers and administrators going to get those salary increases if we don't have a federal government that steps in to fill in the gaps created by that shortfall due to COVID? So those are some of the practical things I think. It boils down to money. It boils down to the federal government not shirking its responsibility, but saying, you know what we just experienced is unprecedented. So now we need to mobilize our federal resources in an unprecedented way to help our states and local governments.
Right, and I think that you definitely bring up a lot of good points, and clearly there are a lot more. Can both of you talk about, first, you all have been out on the campaign trail for some time, interacting with constituents all over your districts. Can you all talk about some of their most pressing concerns, and what are some of your solutions? You've given a lot of solutions already, so you might have to repeat them again, but what are some of your solutions to address those issues? And we'll start with Jamaal.
All right. People want jobs. People want better jobs, higher paying jobs. People want health care. People want job training programs in their community. I mean, our district represents, it's a tale of two districts. Just like America has this huge economic inequality, our district is the same way. Like in one part of the district, you have some of the wealthiest homes in the country. And on the other side of the district, you have abject poverty. And that part of the district is the district that has felt most neglected and most ignored by the current representation, who is Elliot Engel. So people want jobs, people want job training programs, people want healthcare, people want their seniors taken care of. You know, Co-op City is a major part of our district. Co-op City is the largest naturally occurring retirement community in the country. There are thousands of seniors living in Co-op City. They see their prescription drug prices going up, and rent is still high, and there's no transportation, to Mondaire's point. So they feel stuck and stifled, and they're not able to age with dignity and live with any sort of independence. So seniors need incredible support. Schools are underfunded, etc. So these are just some of the areas where people are, you know, identifying a need. And to Mondaire's point, the federal government has the resources to invest in our communities and invest in our people. But unfortunately, you know, it's easy for us to, you know, raise the budget of the Pentagon into trillions of dollars and give $1 trillion tax breaks to the wealthy on Wall Street without investing in people.
We only add housing to it, and people are struggling to figure out how to pay rent, to say nothing of paying a mortgage, all throughout this district and frankly all throughout the country. And we need a federal government that makes sure that it is providing, because that is the most immediate need, even before healthcare. Just having a roof over your head, and God forbid you have children you got to take care of, or an elderly parent that, you know, can't fend for his or herself.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, you all made amazing, you know, points. It's clear that we could talk about this all day. However, we only have a limited amount of time. So we want to thank both of you for joining us and really giving us some insight, not only into your platforms, but for a lot of solutions that we can really utilize post COVID-19, hopefully starting now, in order to improve the lives of all New Yorkers and people all over the nation. And we want to thank you, the viewers, for watching Raising the Bar with the MBBA on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network. See you next time.
Great. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Peace and love.